And that is a magical connection between you and that venue. And any venue can do this. I use art houses because I worked with a lot of art houses, but any cinema can do this. Any cinema can use technology, the ticketing platform, email marketing, all of those different features. They can use those features to connect with those ticket buyers and help push the narrative of their story and understand how their story is connecting with that ticket buyer.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Danny Loria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. And in this week's episode, my colleague Rebecca Pauley interviews from Agile Ticketing Solutions Shane Burkett in a great conversation going over all of the needs exhibitors have to keep in mind when selecting the right point of sale, the right ticketing solution, because boy, they'll need it. We are officially in a box office rally thanks to the fantastic opening weekend from Amazon MGM's Project Hail Mary. And to discuss everything in that performance is my colleague and co-host Chad Kenrick from Box Office Pro. Chad, welcome back. Another solid touchstone here in the recovery effort of the box office. 2026 finally coming into focus. You saw this movie ahead of time. I know you already mentioned how much you liked it. The audience you were with loved it. What have you been hearing since the domestic debut of Project Hail Mary?
Lots of good things, lots of good word of mouth. I was hoping, based on my early screening, I felt like this was going to have a great play at the box office. So I'm glad to see these numbers rolling in and these stats confirming that. It's a really fun sci-fi movie and great on a big screen. I did see it on an IMAX screen. Always good when you have a big space saga.
I can only imagine how it looks in a premium format. An audience is really turning out here with the best opening weekend of the year, a record that it might only keep for a couple more weekends before the release of the Super Mario Bros. Galaxy movie from Universal on April 1st. But to date, best opening weekend of 2026 with $80 million, $80.5 million to be exact, dethroning the overperformance of Scream 7 in late February. This has really been a fantastic close to Q1 with some really strong showing. Even something like Disney Pixar's Hoppers that opened up in early March, that movie wasn't the world-beating opening weekend. We didn't expect it to be that. But because of the word of mouth, Hoppers has really stayed in the picture with solid performances, a 37% drop on week 2, and then last weekend on week 3, a 38% drop. Fantastic numbers there as well. I'm feeling really good about where we're headed this year. I still don't think it's going to be a $10 billion year, but 9.4, 9.5 billion domestic is more or less what we're looking at here. Chad, what were some of the reports from the top circuits? Because I know this must have been a bonanza for some of those national chains out there.
AMC Theaters delivered the biggest opening weekend at AMC in 2026 to date, and also it was the company's second highest weekend of the year for admissions revenue. And they also said globally, admissions revenue for the weekend was more than 70% higher than the same weekend in 2025. Meanwhile, over at Regal Cineworld, the U.S. circuit achieved 18.5 market share for the title, and a number of those Regal locations ranking prominently among the top theaters nationwide, with Regal Irvine Spectrum at number 2 and Regal Hacienda Crossings at 7. And Regal Union Square, which we've both frequented often, at number 8.
Great renovation there at the Union Square Regal from a couple of years back. Yeah, solid numbers here for the major chains. On a macro level, that $80 million opening weekend is just shy of the $82 million opening weekend of Oppenheimer. Those two titles have been the only non-sequel, non-franchise films of the last decade to cross that $80 million opening weekend benchmark. And to put that into better focus, we had been comparing the performance of this title ahead of release to something like The Martian, the other Andy Weir novel adaptation that hit screens back in 2015. A very different market, a very different box office. Back then, it opened, The Martian did, to $54 million, ended up topping out at around $228 million domestic. So you compare that $54 million mark with that multiple to this $80 million mark more than a decade later for Project Hail Mary. I would love to get a 4X performance here in legs. I think we'll have to see what word of mouth says, what other movies coming into the market have to say about that. But so far, an $80 million start is really beating all of the comparables we had out of the water. At this point, it even outperformed something like Us, the Jordan Peele movie from 2019 that was released more or less on the same weekend. That opened to around 71 million before topping out at 175. And even something like F1, which is, yes, an original movie, but one based on a major sport that had sort of a marketing hook in there. That was the other comp we had for that. That opened at around $57 million back in June of last year, ends up topping at $189 million domestic. So with an $80 million opening weekend for Project Hail Mary, we're confident this movie is going to hit that $200 million domestic benchmark. Overseas, I think the international rollout contributed around $60 million on opening weekend for a $140 million worldwide debut. And looking at these numbers on the gender splits, on the demographics, Chad, this fairly decently well-balanced movie, 57% male moviegoers against 43% female. And then in terms of the demographics, the largest quadrant attending this movie on opening weekend is one of the toughest to hit. Not exactly Gen Z. It's that millennial generation, usually with careers and children that make it difficult to go to the movies. The 25 to 34-year-old demo coming up with 26% of the tickets on opening weekend. The number 2 demo being adults aged 18 to 24 years old with 22% of the tickets. So nearly half of the moviegoers here are people aged 18 to 34. That's the prime demographic that a lot of folks want to get in front of that ends up being kind of tricky to target. They were able to target it, and to compound on that, the Hispanic demographic group, once again, over-indexing in relation to their proportion of the publication with 20% of tickets for opening weekend. All in all, every single data point that we have for Project Hail Mary, I think, is a win so far. Matching, what do you thought about the film, Chad?
Amazon MGM has to be excited about this performance. This is really the first title in their slate that they really built up as a 4-quadrant.
And it's something they really needed. We weren't sure how this year one of a full theatrical slate from Amazon MGM was going to play out. But as we're saying, so far, so good. And the momentum continues as we look forward to April. Of course, this coming weekend isn't going to be a major weekend in terms that we don't have a big release coming on the heels of Project Hail Mary, and you've got Super Mario right around the corner coming out on Wednesday, April 1st. So this was always going to be a little bit of a blip on the radar, a little bit of a holdover week, if you will. We are expecting a very competitive hold from Project Hail Mary on week 2 with the debut of Warner Brothers' They Will Kill You coming in, let's say, in a very muted performance. We are expecting an opening weekend under $10 million for that Warner's title. However, as soon as we hit April 1st, Super Mario Brothers Galaxy, man, this movie's just climbing up the tracking charts here, Chad. We are expecting an opening weekend on a 5-day basis between 180 to 200 million. It might go up even more the next time you hear from us on Thursday of next week. For a 3-day basis, this looks like it can play around the 150 to 170 million dollar range. It's really hard to nail this down to a very specific range just because the performance in the pre-sales has been fantastic.
It's such a beloved IP. And I think that first film performing as well as it did and being as well received by audiences as it was has really built in a lot of excitement and audience for this next animated chapter. It's crazy to think that we have not had an animated Mario until
How?
2023. Yeah.
How?
Yeah. It seems like a no-brainer.
It seems like the peak of that IP was when we were kids, like when we were 6, 7, 8 years old. It seems like at this point, it's very much a nostalgia play, which honestly is probably feeding some ticket sales. I have to admit, I sat through portions of the first Super Mario Brothers title, the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out in 2023. I sat through some parts of it on Peacock where it's streaming with my 2.5-year-old toddler. She had a great time. But I might have had just slightly a better time than she did because I was just reliving all of that nostalgia. You're absolutely right on that amazement that this took so long to make it to screens. But now that it has, the sky's the limit. Looking at the benchmarks here from the 2023 original, it was a $146 million 3-day opening weekend and a $574 million domestic run for that title. An incredible result that turned that into the number 2 release of 2023, trailing only Barbie. So with this sequel, I think the sky's the limit. There's a lot of potential here. And the market's just going to keep on climbing. That's obviously going to be the big beginning of April title. At the end of April, the Michael Jackson biopic ticket sales are coming into frame here. And we're looking as of now at an opening weekend similar to Project Hail Mary at the end of April. So good, yeah. Solid. I'm not too sure what the legs are going to be on Michael. We have to see what the audience reaction is to how they tackle that story. But all in all, a strong ending to Q1 and a solid start for Q2, a Q2 that we do expect to climb over the $2.5 billion benchmark for the year. As Q1 on a quarter-by-quarter level is more or less performing as to what our expectations were going to be before we came into the year. We expected coming into 2026 for Q1 to finish around $1.65 billion, which would have made it the best Q1 since 2023 and the second best Q1 since the onset of the pandemic. Of course, if you remember the 2020 box office, the closures for cinemas only happened around the, let's say, mid-March timeframe. So most of Q1 was already in the books. But the number to beat here in terms of the best post-pandemic Q1 is $1.72 billion from 2023. We're going to get more or less close to that figure. Right now, we're coming into the weekend at around $1.6-ish billion. So it's going to be close. I'm not sure we get there. But the fact that we are able to hit those benchmarks for this quarter the way we expected to, frankly, probably somewhat exceeding that $1.65 billion forecast we had for this quarter, I think puts us in a really good position for a Q2 to really, really help build on this momentum.
Yeah, because that's where we've struggled in the last few years is that Q1 interruption. And then again, when we get to that September, October timeframe.
Yeah. It's always the hardest quarter to get through in this post-pandemic era, the first 3 months of the year. I think we've turned the corner. Frankly, we probably turned the corner with Scream 7 in that last weekend of February that I think started bringing in a consistent performance week over week at the box office. And it's smooth sailing from here till the end of the summer. And then, of course, we get through another hiccup before we get to the holiday corridor. And having all this in mind, as we talk about this recovery, as we talk about this box office rally, the fact that we have a consistent release schedule that we can depend on for the coming weeks and months, this is a great opportunity to segue into our feature segment with our colleague Shane Burkett from Agile Ticketing Solutions. He speaks with box office pros Rebecca Pauley about that entire ticketing ecosystem, making sure that your digital ticketing is done correctly, that your point of sale is the right point of sale for you, and that can accommodate things like your loyalty program, your membership status, a fantastic company that works with circuits and art houses alike. That conversation is coming up after this commercial break.
Agile Ticketing Solutions is a North America-based provider of ticketing and venue management software, serving the live entertainment industry since 1999. Headquartered in Hermitage, Tennessee, AgileTix supports cinemas with a unified platform that connects box office, concessions, merchandise, memberships, and donor engagement. Designed to streamline operations while elevating the guest experience, AgileTix combines robust back-office tools with custom reporting, branded websites, and native iOS and Android mobile applications. To learn more, contact Shane Burkett or visit www.agiletix.com.
And I am joined here today on the Box Office Podcast by Shane Burkett, Director of Strategic Marketing at AgileTix. Shane, you go to conferences all around the nation. If there's anything about strategic marketing, specifically for small businesses, you know about it. So I'm really excited to speak with you today.
I'll tell you, in the words that were in my head when you were saying, I was like, you go to conference. I'm like, actually, I go to work and I live at conferences. So I think I'm there more than I'm at my office. It's so great to see you.
So I want to kind of start off setting the stage with kind of a broader question. The place where you have to start when you're marketing, you have to know what's the story you want to tell. What is the story of your cinema? How do you recommend they kind of get into that to winnow out the story? Because you want something that's going to work for you and connect with your community.
Crafting a story is such a great first step. It's where you should start. Before you even begin your marketing campaigns, before you even begin building out your social, before you begin even bringing people on staff, because the story really kind of drives the mission, right? It drives the values of your organization, and people want to know. They want to know how your venue, how your theater, how your cinema connects with that community. And a lot of times the historic theaters, they may have a story that they tell, that their grandparents used to come here. That was their first date. And then as the theater aged in their community, it became a place where people would go to find films about social justice. They would come there to find films about all the things that are happening in the world. You got to remember, these were places where stories unfolded, and the venue itself became such a critical part of that community's story. And so creating that story, packaging that story, and making sure that everything you do amplifies that story to your community is a great place to start when you're putting together your marketing strategy. Getting to understand what your theater, what your venue means to that community might start with your customers, with your ticket base, with people that buy the tickets that come in your venue. And so you can ask them point blank, if you are my ticket buyer and you're coming to my theater, I would look at you and say, Rebecca, what does it do to you? How does it make you feel? How does the brand make you feel? How do you feel when you're here enjoying an experience? What do you look forward to when you're coming here, and what do you reflect on when you leave? That will help you craft that part of the story. And then when I get that data from you, now I'm going to start putting together a narrative that articulates exactly what I want my ticket buyers and my patrons to know when they come to that theater, what they're going to lean into, what I want them to understand about my venue.
When you say lean into it, an identity or a philosophy or a tone, I mean, that's something that has to carry across all facets of your brand as a cinema. I find that oftentimes it can be tough to be consistent with that brand.
The brand can modify, can go through an osmosis. It can change a little with the time, but sticking to that core, sticking to what your organization is about, sticking to exactly how your venue, your institution communicates to your community, is if you can stick that brand and make sure that it's concreted in, that's going to be there for the long haul, and helping those venues understand how to get that, extract that, and then how to make sure that it is woven through everything that you do and all your social and everything. Make sure that brand, that brand image is articulated everywhere. If you are going to make a significant change, do not do it lightly. And I can give you 100 examples of organizations who did a brand change and were like, oops.
And somebody new to the board of directors comes in. They're like, oh, let's try that.
So, don't do it lightly. I'm a big fan of focus groups, and you would be so surprised at how many time ticket buyers are so flattered when they're asked to give their opinion about something. Lean into net performance indicators. That'll also help you understand what your story is and how it resonates with your community.
You have to think about, what does your signage say about your brand? What does your menu say about your brand? What does your app say about your brand? Because like there used to be, you would just go to a movie theater and you would have the lobby and the box office, and those things really just do not exist anymore.
One of the biggest memories that I have of CinemaCon was listening to Steven Spielberg speak. And it was a mixed room of theaters, cinemas, big box megaplexes, and art houses. And I'm flattered because one of our clients was sitting very close to where apparently Mr. Spielberg knew that this client was an art house. And he immediately
Steven
pointed
Spielberg
at
knows who I
this.
am.
Yep, that pointed at this art house executive director and says, these are the organizations that's doing it right. And he went on to say, these organizations know their customer. They know how to connect with them. They've personalized the experience. They've made the experience rich for them. And so that's what keeps people coming back in the door. And the more that the demographic changes to where people are looking for more of a service-based experience, you're going to see people going, what theaters can I get that experience? What theaters can I get that support social causes, that are showing films that are relevant to my interest? How do you find that out? That's through data. The data that your ticketing platform is probably already grabbing for you can give you that information and help you craft your story. So you've already got a lot of the tools right there in your hand. You can do a survey to your customers every time they come in to see a film. Make sure they get a survey. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. Just something that starts feeding you this information that you can begin building brick by brick the story of your organization.
Yeah, I just fill out surveys for, I get from the MTA, like how has been your transit experience? Like it makes you
Absolutely.
feel heard. It makes you feel like you have a dog in the fight.
Rebecca, that is what you just said is the core element that the ticket buyer is just screaming to say is, I want to be heard. I just want you to listen to me.
I want to support you. I want to give you my money.
Absolutely. And so the moment that you take and do something different, let's say you go to the megaplex or you go to the big cinema and you go to that intimate theater, and that intimate theater reaches out to you and says, Rebecca, we noticed that you came to the Steven Spielberg marathon or the Stephen King marathon. Would you like to see more of that? Do you want us to do a Hitchcock film festival?
Like Spielberg has a new film coming out this summer. Like, would you be interested in some sort of a party or event around that new release?
Absolutely. And that is a magical connection between you and that venue. And any venue can do this. I use art houses because I worked with a lot of art houses, but any cinema can do this. Any cinema can use technology, the ticketing platform, email marketing, all of those different features. They can use those features to connect with those ticket buyers and help push the narrative of their story and understand how their story is connecting with that ticket buyer.
And you definitely, how the story is connecting with the ticket buyer, but also maybe sometimes how your story is not connecting with the
Absolutely.
ticket buyer.
Absolutely.
Like you want to go in there, the data can tell you like straight up, oh, maybe this sort of film really isn't working. Oh, we're seeing a large amount of people show up for films around, documentaries around like food and culinary stuff, just to, pick something out of the air.
You're 100% right. Trend recognition with data is going to be critical for the sophisticated, savvy theater operator to do. And that is looking at those reports, looking at those NPIs. You're going to be able to tell if the restrooms weren't clean, if the concessions area was not clean. Those are things that you can start gleaning from these reports as you're going out and doing these surveys. That's going to give you an understanding, because let me tell you something, those kind of things can tarnish a brand. And your story is core. And if your brand is attached to that story and all of a sudden that tarnish starts to happen, that's when you as a theater operator have to think through, what do I need to do to change this to make sure that my brand and story stays consistent in the eyes of my ticket buyer?
I want to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago, kind of phrasing it as you need to be data savvy, tech savvy. It's important these days to really be able to get a grasp on this information and read the story that data is trying to tell you. You've been in this industry for a long time. I mean, Agile has been 25 years.
25 years. I've been to the company for 15 years.
So you've seen, I mean, that just in terms of tech is such an exponential just increase of what's possible over that time. Like, how difficult or how easy is it, I guess, to read data?
Well, it's becoming easier and easier. I mean, we're entering a new world with artificial intelligence where you can pull a report from your ticketing platform. And a lot of times, at least with our platform, there is a database or a dashboard rather that users can use to really kind of get a instant vitals check on their venue. And then there's a lot of exportable features so where they can export ticket information or customer information and start pulling that into some of the more sophisticated AI engines and begin asking it questions. So what you're imagining in your head is probably a more ad hoc rudimentary way of doing it 5 years ago, whereas now you have the ability of pulling some of the at least the performance type stuff to get vitals on your venue, pulling that into a GPT engine. I do encourage people to not allow it to retain that information because we don't quite know where that is. But I would still say that it's safe to start using that to chew through data and give you some really rich information that you can use to put actions in place for your venue.
And you can use it to the audience segmentation component. I mean, you're not just looking at your audience as a monolith. You can break it down by, I mean, look, just loyalty memberships and subscription memberships have gotten so much more important just over the last few years.
And that's what we tell people is when a theater comes on board with our platform, I'll use that as an example. The loyalty aspect is really kind of a great way for you to extend a handshake to a ticket buyer and go, we are so happy you're here with us. I always like to put things in very simple terms. We're so happy you're here with us. I'll tell you what, Rebecca, if you come to the next 10 films, we're going to give you a bag of popcorn. And that at least gives you an incentive. You already love coming to the theater, right? So I've already tapped into a vein that you're going to come, you're going to enjoy it. Why not get a reward? And for that, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Maybe every time the report tells me that you came in to see a film, the next day I'm going to, pop a question in the app and go, hey, Rebecca, did you enjoy the film you saw last night? Was there anything in the venue that you would love to see improved? These are basic questions you can ask in your loyalty program. Most people aren't offended by you asking their opinion of something. It's very non-invasive, and they can go in there and make that response, and then come back, and you can then pouring through that data. You can then say, all right, here's some opportunities. You may get some great ideas just from people who come and already experience your house. Why not take that information and begin making it actionable tasks that makes your organization or your venue better?
You can look at people who used to be members of the loyalty program and aren't anymore. You can kind of send them out emails and get them thinking like, oh yeah, I have been to this movie theater,
Oh, yeah.
three times in the past couple months. Like maybe I should re-up.
I will say, I tell venues all the time, and I teach a class on email marketing and how to use it to build your market, because it is one silo of marketing that I think a lot of theaters aren't really amplifying in a productive way. And I would love to see more, especially my independent theaters. I would love to see them using email marketing, not only as a way to talk about what's happening at the venue, but also encourage that email to be forwarded to their friends, family, loved ones, neighbors, whatever. Make film taking back the community aspect of film. I always jokingly say we always like to go sit in a dark room and watch stories together. Make that a thing. Make that part of the following of your venue. That's what we do here. And I could name a few brands that really do a fantastic job with that, because they really have won. Email marketing is still very powerful. In visual venue, using some sort of visual aspect inside the theater. That is also a big thing. When people come in, you can remind them of what's coming down the pipe. So now you've got, something on the screen when they walk into the theater saying, hey, this next film is coming. And then next week, they're going to get an email saying, hey, this film is coming. How many times have you gotten an email that you said, oh, yeah, I remember when I saw that trailer, I wanted to see that film and I totally forgot about it. That's all you've got to do is just remind them that that film, that trailer that they saw 7 months ago is going to be at your theater. You remember this film. You saw it as a preview at another film, and here it is again. It's coming. Be sure. I think for me, it's Devil Wears Prada 2. That's the film that I'm like, I am going to go see that film at the theater. I don't know why. I love the first film. It's a great story. I can't wait to connect with it, and I can't wait to see it in a theater. So that's going to be a premium night for me.
If there's like a cocktail screening or something that like, I mean, you could have if you have on the digital signage on the menu boards, like, hey, if you came to this movie, you have your ticket stub. I guess no one has ticket stubs anymore. Your digital ticket stub. You can get a discount on a side or on an appetizer if you buy a cocktail. So that something that encourages people, like they do want to hang around after the movie and chat. Like that's the best. Now there's so much more space for it with the lobbies not being used for like box office counters.
100%. And there is another thing. This is great for my small theaters, and we'll peel off on this because I think what you just hit on was so amazing. And that is economic impact that your theater, regardless of what type of theater you are, the economic impact that your theater brings to a downtown space or to a commercial district is critical. And it's critical that as you're developing that story, you're able to weave the impact that your venue brings to your community. And the way you do that, one of the ways that you do that is you can actually build partnerships with restaurants, with arcades, with family entertainment centers, and say, hey, we're wanting to have a campaign to where if they maybe show that the ticket that they just went to the theater or whatever, and they get maybe 5 or 10% off, and we can start sharing that customer base, because a theater customer is usually an entertainment customer, right? They're going to the theater. They're probably going to want to make a night of it. They want to have dinner before, maybe have a cocktail at the venue, maybe have a cocktail after, whatever it is, or go play arcades or whatever. Help the customer, help the ticket buyer create that evening experience based on whatever their budget and desires are. And you can do that by connecting with other members in your community. And that's going to help you with tracking how your theater impacts the community and impacts the organizations all around. And that's a great part of the story on what cinema can do for a commercial area.
That goes great into a grant application.
100%. Yeah. If you're a nonprofit theater, absolutely. If you're not doing this, you're not doing it right, because you need to be connecting with your Chamber of Commerce. You need to be connecting with your commercial district areas and all of the adjacent businesses that are close to you that go along with your business. Think of all the different ways that you can connect with them and share in that success together.
And that there's so much that goes on. And yet people kind of think of it and it looks really daunting. Like, oh, go pop into the bakery next door and see if they'd be interested in a partnership, city council meetings, this, that. Like a lot of the grunt work, you don't have to do anymore.
No.
Like there's a lot of the stuff that tech has made it so it's a lot easier than it may seem. Market smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. And there's grant programs, hiring programs, things like that can all be developed because the story is put together, and it's put together in a solid way. Start with your ticketing platform, start with questioning your ticket buyers, start developing that story, and then build that story from there.
It falls into place.
It does. It does indeed.
If I could plug local news, your local reporters. Like, I know local news is on the road for quite a while, but doesn't have to continue to be the case.
It doesn't. And I'll tell you that, they are always looking for stories. Never think that. Make friends with reporters. Reporters are always looking for stories. You never know when they come into the station or into the radio station or whatever, that they, today they're like, let's do a feel good story. Let's do a fun story. Let's do something that people, that will make people feel good. And why shouldn't your venue be that story? Why shouldn't your venue be a place where people can go, you know what, tonight's a great night. It's Friday night. It's a great night. Let's go see a film.
I love it. Cinema is all about community. It's about connection. And you can run a cinema that same way. A lot of stuff on your plate. Everybody has to wear a lot of hats, but there are, whether it's, something like Agile or all the other, there's so much in this space that can help out.
I always talk about, since the dawn of mankind getting the brains that we have now, we became storytellers. From the moment that the fire came up and we realized that we could make shadows on a wall, we began telling stories. And those stories were purposeful. They were critical for our development as we became more and more and more sophisticated in the way that we think about things. The stories build empathy. The stories build character. It helps us see things in a different light. And so those are things that I always recommend. And that's why I think theater and cinema is such a critical part of our society.
Shane, in just a few weeks, we're all looking forward to CinemaCon. I know being surrounded by people who understand and really love the cinema experience, are passionate about it, are energetic about it. What does Agile have going on at CinemaCon this year?
So in CinemaCon, we are going to have a hospitality suite that we are going to be hosting some workshops in. So people can come and they can enjoy some refreshments on us. And we're going to have some little 1-hour training programs that they can go through that will be around storytelling for your venue, around building out the economic impact of your organization and how it works in your community, how to read data, how to use the data to really create an action items list for your venue to make sure that you're winning. So those are all things. All you got to do is stop by our booth at CinemaCon and we can get you, directions on where to participate in those things.
Yeah, and there are chairs, right? People are going to be able to sit.
They are going to be able to sit. It's in a hospitality suite. I forget what wing it's in. I want to say the Augustus wing. It's going to be really close to the trade show area, but folks can come and do that. And we're also going to have software demos. So I want people to, if they do want to learn more about Agile and how we operate inside the cinema space, we'll have that ability for you as well.
And that was Shane Burkett from Agile Ticketing Solutions speaking with box office pros Rebecca Pauley. Earlier, you heard from myself, Daniel Loria, and my colleague Chad Kennerk going over the latest news and box office forecasting for the weeks to come. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. The Box Office Podcast comes out every single Thursday. Make us a part of your daily listening habits, and we will talk to you again very soon.